She came to him with the best news of her life. She left without saying a word. Nia Brooks stood in the marble corridor of the Grand Hyatt Seoul, 31 weeks pregnant, rainwater still drying on her coat, a small ultrasound photo pressed flat against her palm. She had flown in 2 days early just to surprise him. She had rehearsed the moment 100 times on the plane, how she would knock, how his face would change, how he would reach for her before she finished the sentence. Instead, the door to suite 1407 opened and a woman stepped out. Not a colleague. Not a hotel employee. A woman adjusting the strap of her dress with practiced ease, lipstick freshly reapplied, heels in her hand because she hadn't bothered to put them back on. She looked at Nia once, just once, then walked away down the corridor without a single word, as though Nia were furniture. Behind her, framed in the open doorway, stood Kang Min-jae. He froze. If you've ever had the floor disappear beneath your feet while you were still standing on it, you already know what happened to Nia Brooks in that moment. Drop a like if this story already has your heart. Comment below with your city and country. I want to see how far this story travels. And stay with us, because this is only the beginning. The channel has more stories like this one waiting, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The rain had started somewhere over the Yellow Sea. Nia remembered watching it through the oval window of the plane, the way it came in sheets, turning the city below into something blurred and impressionistic, like a painting left out in bad weather. She had pressed her hand flat against her stomach and thought, he's going to lose his mind when he sees this picture. She was smiling. That was what she would remember later, in the way that people remember embarrassing things, the precise, specific detail of her own happiness right before it ended. She was smiling, and the baby was kicking, and she had the ultrasound photo in a small white envelope that she'd been carrying in her coat pocket for 11 days because she wanted to tell him in person. 11 days. She had waited 11 days for this. The taxi from Incheon took 40 minutes. She didn't call ahead. That was the whole point. She had changed her flight without telling him, paid the difference herself, arranged for their housekeeper to cover the apartment until she returned. She had planned every detail of the surprise except for the part where she arrived at the hotel and everything went wrong. The Grand Hyatt Seoul stood exactly as it always did, tall, expensive, indifferent to whatever individual dramas played out inside its walls. She had been to this hotel before, twice, when Min-jae had used it for business meetings that required the kind of neutral ground that didn't belong to anyone. She knew the lobby. She knew the elevator bank on the east side that was faster than the one near the entrance. She knew the floor his suite was on because he had texted her the room number 3 days ago when he'd said, "Missing you. Be back Thursday." Thursday was 2 days away. She had moved Thursday to Tuesday. She took the east elevator. She rode up alone. The corridor on the 14th floor was the kind of quiet that only expensive hotels manage, a specific pressurized silence that swallowed sound at the carpet's edge. The lights were low. The air smelled faintly of cedar and recycled warmth. Nia walked the length of the hallway with the envelope in her coat pocket and her heartbeat in her ears, and she was still smiling. Suite 1407 was at the far end. She raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles touched it. What happened in the next 4 seconds would take her months to fully reconstruct because the mind does not process certain things in real time. It records them and processes them later, in the dark, when there is no longer anything else to do. What she registered first was color, a dress, red, silk, or something close to it. Then movement, a woman stepping through the doorway, one hand trailing along the door's edge with the familiarity of someone who had been inside that room for more than a few minutes. The heels were in her right hand, held loosely by the ankle straps, the way you carry shoes when you've taken them off and have no intention of putting them back on in a hurry. The woman looked at Nia. It was a flat look, not cruel, not apologetic, not startled, the look of someone who had encountered inconveniences before and classified this as one. She looked at Nia once, registered her coat, her stomach, the envelope, and then looked away and walked past her down the corridor without a word or a change in her expression. Nia turned. Min-jae was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a shirt, open at the collar, and his tie was gone. His shoes were off. His jacket was somewhere behind him, in the room. He looked exactly like a man who had just been inside his hotel suite with a woman, because he was exactly that man, and no amount of looking at him was going to change it. He froze. She watched his face go through three things in rapid succession: recognition, then something that looked like shock, then something that was harder to read, something that dropped behind his eyes and stayed there, unreadable. He said her name. Nia. Just that. Not a question, not an explanation. Her name, in the voice she knew better than any other voice, in the accent that had always made her name sound like something he'd chosen for her. She did not respond. She was looking at him the way you look at something you're trying to memorize before it disappears, or the way you look at something you're trying to understand before you decide what it means. Her hand went to her coat pocket. She felt the edge of the envelope. She took it out. She set it on the small console table just inside the door. The narrow table with the hotel's orchid arrangement, the one thing the Grand Hyatt kept in every suite. She placed the envelope there, on the edge of the table, precisely, the way you place something when you want it to be found. Then she turned around and walked back down the corridor. Nia. He said it differently this time, louder, with something desperate catching in it. She heard his feet on the carpet behind her. Nia, wait. She pressed the elevator button. It's not, just let me explain. The elevator opened. She walked in. She pressed the lobby button. She kept her eyes on the middle distance, and she did not look at him. And when the doors began to close, she heard him say her name one more time, a third time, with a fracture in it that she had never heard from him before in 3 years of marriage. The doors closed. The elevator descended. She stood in it alone, her hand on her stomach, the floor numbers dropping one by one, and she breathed in and out with the careful precision of someone who has decided that they are not going to fall apart inside a moving elevator in a hotel where anyone could see them. She made it to the lobby. She made it through the revolving door. She made it to the taxi stand in the rain before her knees stopped cooperating, and she had to hold the metal rail with both hands while the rain came down on her coat and soaked through to her collar, and she stood there, bent slightly forward, breathing, just breathing, until a taxi pulled up and the driver said something in Korean that she couldn't process. She got in. She gave the driver the address of the guest house in Mapo, where a friend had a spare room. She had used it once before, after a business trip when her flight landed too late to go home. The friend's name was Ji-yeon. Nia had her number. She would call. She would figure out the rest later. That was the plan. That was the whole plan. In that moment, make it to Ji-yeon's. Everything after that was a problem she would deal with tomorrow. She did not cry until she was inside the taxi, facing away from the window, watching the seats in front of her. Not loudly, not dramatically, the way people cry when they are very tired and very alone and have been holding something for longer than they realized, quietly, with their jaw clenched and their face doing the minimum required. The baby kicked. She pressed her hand against it. "I know," she said, out loud, to no one. The driver said nothing. She had met Min-jae in Atlanta, at a trade show she hadn't even wanted to attend. Her business partner Dara had convinced her. "You need to expand your network," Dara had said. "You can't just stay in your studio and expect people to find you." Nia had argued that her work was good enough to speak for itself. Dara had said that was exactly the kind of thing people said right before they got left behind. They had compromised. Nia would go for 1 day, 2 panels and a cocktail hour, then back to the hotel. She'd lasted 4 hours before drifting to the far edge of the cocktail reception, away from the noise near the tall windows overlooking the street. She had a drink she wasn't finishing and a conversation she was trying to avoid, and she was checking her phone for the 4th time when someone stopped next to her and said, in English, with the particular deliberateness of someone choosing each word, "You look like you'd rather be somewhere else." She looked up. He was tall, Korean, well-dressed in the understated way of men who don't need their clothes to announce anything. He was looking at the street below, not at her, which was unusual. "I would," she said. "Where?" "My studio." He had turned then. "What do you make?" She had expected the usual response to that question. The polite interest, the brief follow-up, the pivot to whatever the person actually wanted to talk about. Instead, he had asked 3 more questions, and then 5 more, and they had stood at that window for 40 minutes while the reception moved and hummed around them, and at no point had he mentioned his own work, his own position, his own anything. She found out afterward through Dara, who had seen them talking and done 30 seconds of internet research on her phone. Kang Min-jae was not officially anyone important. His public profile described him as a private investor with interests in logistics and real estate. His company was registered in Seoul. He had a clean record and a quiet presence. What the internet did not say, what Nia would learn slowly, over months, in small pieces that she had to fit together herself, was what he actually was, who he actually ran, what the logistics and real estate were fronts for, and how many people in Seoul moved when he told them to. She would remember later the exact moment she found out. They had been dating for 4 months. She had flown to Seoul to see him, her first time in the city, and they had been in his apartment when his phone rang and he answered it in Korean, and she watched his face change in a way she had never seen it change before. Not frightening, not violent, colder, more certain. The particular expression of someone making a decision they've made many times without remorse. After he hung up, he had turned to her and said, "There's something I have to tell you." She had listened. He had told her. Not everything. She would understand later that what he told her that night was a carefully edited version, shaped for her, designed to be honest enough to maintain trust without being complete enough to frighten her away. But she understood the shape of it. She understood what he was. She understood that the man who had asked her 20 questions about her design process at an Atlanta trade show was also a man who operated in spaces where the law was a suggestion. She had needed 2 days. Then she had come back. She had reasons she could articulate and reasons she couldn't. She told Dara the articulable ones. She was an adult. She had made an informed choice. She could handle herself. She did not tell Dara the ones that lived deeper, that there was something in him she recognized, something that had nothing to do with power or danger or the appeal of men who operated outside the lines, something that had to do with the way he listened and the way he made decisions and the complete absence of performance in everything he did. She had told herself she would not let the life he lived become her life. She would build her business in Seoul. She would keep her work separate. She would be his wife and not his accessory, and she would not sit still and watch and say nothing when things troubled her. She had kept most of that promise. She had done well in Seoul. Her design studio had taken 3 years to gain traction, but it had traction now. Real traction, not the kind that disappeared when the novelty of an American designer in a Korean market wore off. She had clients she was proud of. She had a team of 4. She had a name in the small circles where her kind of work circulated that meant something. She had also, somewhere in the middle of building that, fallen completely in love with her husband. Not the reputation, not the power. Him, the specific person who brought her coffee without being asked, who sat with her through 3 miscarriages without saying the wrong thing once, who had driven 40 minutes to a stationery store on the north side of the city because she had mentioned once, 6 weeks earlier, that she liked a particular kind of paper that was hard to find. That was who she thought she was married to. Standing in that hotel corridor, she had gotten the first real look at the other possibility. The one she had always known was there, technically. The one she had chosen, every day for 3 years, to believe was not the whole picture. Jiyeon opened the door at 11:47 at night and took one look at her and said, in Korean accented English, "Come inside, don't explain yet." Nia came inside. Jiyeon made tea she didn't ask for and set it on the coffee table and sat down across from her and waited. Nia told her, "Not all of it. The outline." Jiyeon was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to say something, or do you want me to just sit here?" "Just sit here." "Okay." They sat there. At some point, Nia's phone started vibrating. She looked at the screen. Min-jae. She declined the call. It rang again. She declined it again. A text came through. "Nia, please, tell me where you are. Just tell me you're safe." She typed back, "I'm safe. Don't call me tonight." A long pause on his end, then, "Okay, I'll wait, but we have to talk." She put the phone face down on the couch cushion. "Do you need anything?" Jiyeon asked. Nia looked at her. "I need to figure out what I'm going to do." "Not tonight." "No," Nia agreed. "Not tonight." She sat with the tea cooling in her hands and the rain still going outside and the baby still occasionally shifting against her ribs, and she thought about the ultrasound photo. sitting on that console table in the 14th floor suite of the Grand Hyatt Seoul, next to a hotel orchid, waiting for a man who had not known she was coming and had not known what she was bringing. She had not taken it back. She had left it there on purpose, and she was not entirely sure what the purpose was, whether it was an accusation or a goodbye or something she didn't have a word for yet, something she had put down because she couldn't carry it anymore. Not tonight. The rain came down outside, and she breathed and didn't cry and didn't sleep for a long time. And the city went on around her, enormous and indifferent, the way cities always are when your particular disaster is happening inside it. And in Suite 1407 of the Grand Hyatt Seoul, Kang Min-jae sat on the edge of the bed holding a small white envelope, staring at an ultrasound photo that had no label on it except a date, and his hands were not steady. Min-jae did not sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed in Suite 1407 with the ultrasound photo in his hands, and he did not move for a long time. The room was quiet in the way hotel rooms are quiet, manufactured, slightly pressurized, the kind of silence that belongs to no one. The orchid on the console table had not moved. The envelope was still there, open now, the small white square of paper resting between his palms like something he was afraid to put down in case it disappeared. He had looked at the photo for 40 minutes before he understood what he was looking at. Not the image itself. He had understood that immediately, the gray wash of it, the small curled shape in the lower left corner that the annotation labeled at 31 weeks. He had understood the biological fact of it in the first 10 seconds. What took 40 minutes was understanding what it meant that she had been standing outside that door with it, that she had come 2 days early, that she had left it on the table without a word and walked away. He set the photo down carefully on the nightstand. Then he stood up and put his fist through the bathroom wall. Not the mirror, not a window. The wall, the specific section of drywall beside the towel rack, which gave with a sound that was quieter than he expected and left a hole roughly the size of his hand at chest height. He stood there with his knuckles against the broken edge and breathed, and the pain in his hand was the first thing he'd felt clearly in the past hour. He wrapped his hand in a hotel towel and called his head of security. Park Sung-ho picked up on the second ring. "Boss, I need her location." A pause. "Mrs. Kang?" "She was at the hotel tonight. She left on foot or by taxi, probably around 10:15. Pull the street cameras. Talk to the taxi dispatch. I need to know where she went." Another pause. Shorter, the kind that meant Sung-ho was doing math. "Is she in danger?" Min-jae looked at his hand wrapped in the towel. "Find her first, then I'll tell you what it is." He hung up. He called her. She declined it. He called again. She declined again. Her text came through. "I'm safe. Don't call me tonight." And he read it 3 times, standing in the middle of the hotel suite with his jacket still on the chair where he'd dropped it 2 hours ago. And he let out a breath that came from somewhere deeper than his lungs. Safe. She was safe. He typed back. He waited. Her response came, "I'll wait, but we have to talk." He put the phone in his pocket and stood there and did the only thing he could do right now, which was nothing. By 6 in the morning, Sung-ho had her location. Not precise, but close. A guest house in Mapogu, registered to a Lim Ji-yeon Korean national age 34, listed in Nia's phone contacts under GG. The taxi driver had remembered the address. Of course he had. Sung-ho had a particular way of asking questions that made people remember things very clearly. Min-jae was in a car headed to Mapo by 6:15. He told the driver to stop 2 blocks from the address. He sat in the back seat and looked at his phone and at the gray morning coming up over the rooftops of Mapogu, and he thought about what he was going to say. He had a version. He had several versions, actually, which was the problem. Each one required him to explain what she had seen in a way that was true and complete, and did not also require him to explain things he wasn't sure he could explain yet. Because the truth was complicated. The truth had layers to it that he had not sorted through himself, and showing up at a guest house at 6 in the morning to deliver an unsorted truth to a 31-week pregnant woman who had spent the night believing the worst of him was not, even he could see this, the right move. He stayed in the car. He sat there for 45 minutes. Then he told the driver to take him back to the hotel. He had one thing he needed to do first. The woman's name was Yoon Seo-yeon. She was 31, the younger sister of Yoon Dae-ho, who ran the distribution network Min Jae used for 3 territories in the southern part of the city. She had shown up at the hotel at 8 o'clock the previous evening without an appointment, and she had told the front desk she was there on behalf of her brother with an urgent message, and Min Jae had made the mistake of letting her come up rather than sending Sung-ho down to handle it. That mistake had a shape now that it hadn't had 12 hours ago. She had stayed for an hour and a half. Nothing had happened. Min Jae had listened to her deliver a message that could have been a phone call, had told her to tell her brother to contact Sung-ho directly in the future, and had walked her to the door. He had not touched her. He had not offered her anything except the brief, functional courtesy that he extended to everyone connected to his operation. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that Nia had been standing outside that door at the exact moment Seo-yeon stepped through it, and Seo-yeon had looked at Nia with that face, that flat, dismissive face, and walked away like the whole thing was beneath her. Like Nia's presence in that corridor was an inconvenience that didn't require acknowledgement. Min Jae had replayed those 4 seconds approximately 200 times since last night. He called Yoon Dae-ho at 7:30. Dae-ho answered with the careful neutrality of a man who had heard something but wasn't sure how much. Min Jae? Your sister was at the Grand Hyatt last night. She told me. Said you had information about the Incheon shipment. I didn't call her. I didn't send for her. She showed up. A pause. Longer than it should have been. She told me you asked for the meeting. Min Jae was quiet for 3 seconds. She told you that? Yes. And you believed her? She's my sister. The sentence sat there between them like something that had been dropped from a height. Get her on the phone, Min Jae said. Today. I need her in front of me. Is this necessary? If it's a misunderstanding, Dae-ho... Min Jae's voice didn't rise. It never rose. It did the opposite. It flattened, the way pressure flattens things, calmly and completely. Get her on the phone. Dae-ho got her on the phone. Seo-yeon was less careful than her brother. She had the confidence of someone who believed she was protected, which meant she hadn't yet done the math on what protection was actually worth when the person offering it was standing on the wrong side of this particular situation. You told your brother I arranged that meeting, Min Jae said. I misunderstood the... Don't. The word was quiet, precise. A door closing, not slamming. Don't finish that sentence unless you're going to finish it honestly. A silence. Then, I needed to speak with you privately. I knew you wouldn't see me if I requested a meeting through official channels. So you invented one. I had information your people wouldn't pass on. About the Incheon situation. It was genuine. And the way you left the suite. Another pause. This one was different. Smaller, tighter. The pause of someone recalculating. I don't know what you mean. Yes, Min Jae said. You do. He hung up. He sat with the phone in his hand and looked at the hole in the bathroom wall, visible from where he sat on the edge of the bed, and understood that what had happened last night was not random. It was not coincidence. Someone had made sure Seo-yeon arrived at that hotel at that time. Someone had made sure she left the suite the way she did, slowly, without hurry, with her shoes in her hand. Someone had either told her that Nia was coming or had made sure the timing worked regardless. The question was whether Seo-yeon had understood what she was being used for, or whether she was simply an instrument that didn't know whose hand was holding it. Either way, his marriage was in pieces on a corridor floor in Mapo-gu, and he had not yet figured out who had put it there. He got back to his main office in Gangnam by 9. His second lieutenant, Choi Ren, was already there. Ren was 29, fast-thinking, had been with the organization for 6 years, and had the particular gift of being able to read a room the moment he entered it. He took one look at Min Jae's hand, still wrapped, the towel replaced with a proper bandage, and at Min Jae's face, and said nothing about either. The Incheon situation, Min Jae said sitting down, moved without authorization 2 nights ago. We lost 4 containers. Ren set a folder on the desk. Whoever did it knew the rotation schedule, which means someone with access to our logistics data. Yes. Min Jae looked at the folder without opening it. Who had the rotation schedule in the last 30 days? Ren listed 7 names. Min-jae listened to all 7. 3 of them surprised him. One of them surprised him enough that he made Ren repeat it. Say that name again. Ren said it again. Oh Jae-won. Oh Jae-won had been with Min-jae for 11 years. He had been trusted with information that could have destroyed Min-jae 4 times over in the past decade, and he had never used it. He was 53, had a daughter in university, had declined promotions 3 times because he preferred the specific work he did over the status of moving up. He was not the kind of man who turned, except that the data said he had access. And the containers had moved. And someone had sent Seo-yeon to that hotel room at the precise moment that Nia Brooks arrived 2 days ahead of schedule. Pull Jae-won's communication logs, Min-jae said. Everything from the last 60 days. Don't tell him. Don't tell anyone. Ren looked at him steadily. You think it's internal? I think someone wanted me distracted, and they chose something specific to distract me with. Min-jae finally opened the folder. They knew about Nia. That landed in the room differently than the other information. Ren was quiet for a moment. How much did they know? Enough to know she was coming, or to engineer the timing without needing to know. One of the two. He turned a page in the folder without reading it. Either way, it was deliberate. And it worked. He said the last 2 words with a flatness that made Ren say nothing further on that topic. Ishe. At 11 that morning, he tried calling her again. She answered this time. Her voice was not cold, not warm, level. The voice of someone who had made a decision about their emotional temperature and was maintaining it through effort. Nia, I said I'd talk to you, not today. Are you... He stopped, restarted. Are you and the baby okay? A pause. We're fine. Where are you? Somewhere safe. I told you that. I know. I just... He stopped again. He had 3 different explanations ready, had been rehearsing them in pieces since 6 in the morning, and none of them were coming out in the right order. Last night wasn't what it looked like. The silence on her end was the kind that has weight. Min-jae. Her voice was still level. That was almost worse than if she had shouted. I know what I saw. You saw a woman leaving my suite. I understand that. But nothing happened. She was there on business. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. And I'm not asking you to believe me without explanation. I'm asking you to let me explain. I'm not ready to hear an explanation. When I said I'm not ready. The level voice cracked, just once, at the edge of the word ready. A single seam in it. Then it repaired itself. I'll call you when I'm ready. Don't come looking for me. He closed his eyes. Okay. I mean it. I know you do. Another pause, then, the ultrasound photo is from last Thursday. Everything is fine. Both of us are fine. She hung up. He sat with the dead phone against his ear for a moment. Then he set it on the desk and pressed both hands flat against the surface and breathed. Last Thursday. Both of us. He had a child coming in 9 weeks, and his wife was in a guest house in Mapogu, and someone inside his organization had deliberately orchestrated the situation to make it look like what she thought it was. And the container loss in Incheon was either connected to that or a separate problem that had been deliberately timed to land on top of it. He was being worked. He could see the shape of it now. Someone was pulling at multiple threads at once, creating noise in every direction, counting on the fact that a man dealing with the collapse of his marriage would make mistakes in his professional decisions that he wouldn't otherwise make. The question was who? And the question after that was how deep it went. Ren knocked and entered without waiting. The communication logs came back with something. Min-jae looked up. Jae-won's clean. Ren set a tablet on the desk. But someone accessed his credentials remotely 6 weeks ago, twice, and used them to pull the rotation schedule. Who? Ren hesitated. Just slightly. The hesitation of a man who doesn't want to say the next thing. The access point traces back to a server that Park Sung-ho uses for his secondary communication network. The room was quiet. Min-jae looked at Ren for a long time without speaking. Sung-ho, who had been his head of security for 8 years, who had been the first person he'd called last night, who had found Nia's location by 6 in the morning with a speed that now, reconsidered, was slightly too fast. How sure are you? Min-jae said. 70%. The trace goes through two obfuscation layers. Someone is good enough to make it look like Sung-ho, which means either it is Sung-ho or someone wanted it to point there. Or both. Or both, Ren agreed. Min-jae stood up. He walked to the window. Seoul moved below him. Traffic, people, the gray mid-morning light coming off the Han River in the distance. He had built something in this city over 15 years, piece by piece, with the specific kind of patience that most people couldn't sustain. He had made it solid. He had made it, as much as anything in his world could be made, trustworthy. Someone had spent considerable time and care trying to pull it apart. "Don't move on Sung-ho yet," he said. "Don't alert him. I want surveillance on his secondary network, and I want someone watching his physical movements without his knowledge." "Understood." "And the Yoon girl, Seo-yeon. Find out who she's been talking to in the last 3 months. Full communication record." "Already running." Min-jae turned from the window. "One more thing." Ren waited. "My wife left last night. She doesn't know what's happening on this side, and I want to keep it that way. Nobody in this organization discusses her location, her condition, or her movements. If I find out someone is monitoring her or using her as leverage before I have a chance to fix this..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Are we clear?" "Yes." "Go." Ren left. Min-jae stood alone in his office and looked at the city and thought about Nia standing in that corridor with a white envelope, smiling, probably. She had a specific way of smiling when she was carrying something good, a compression at the corners, like she was trying to contain it, and getting her face rearranged by 4 seconds of someone else's carefully staged performance. He thought about the look on her face before the elevator doors closed. Not angry, not even devastated, not yet. Something before both of those things. The look of a person who has just been handed information that doesn't fit the world they were living in a moment ago and hasn't yet decided what to do with the misfit. He had put that look on her face. Not by doing what she thought he'd done, but by being exactly the kind of man who could be set up this convincingly, who lived in exactly the kind of world where this kind of move was possible, who had brought her into proximity with the specific dangers that had chosen to use her against him. That was the part he couldn't explain away. Not to her, not to himself. At 4 in the afternoon, 3 things happened within 30 minutes of each other. The first, a message came through a back channel from the Seo family. The Seos ran the Northern Territory, had been in nominal alliance with Min-jae for 4 years, a cold peace that everyone maintained because the alternative was expensive. The message was brief and carried the particular tone of a statement rather than a communication. "We heard there's instability in your house. We're watching to see what develops." The second, Sung-ho walked into the office and sat down across from Min-jae and said with the ease of a man who did not know he was being watched, "I've been hearing some noise from the Incheon people. They're claiming the container loss was sanctioned by someone inside our operation. I think we should get ahead of it." Min-jae looked at him. "Get ahead of it how?" "Let me reach out to Daeho's people, keep the channel open, show them we're not in chaos." "Make the call," Min-jae said. He watched Sung-ho leave the room. He picked up his phone and texted Ren a single word, "Recording." Ren texted back, "Already on." The third thing, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered it out of the specific instinct he had for calls that meant something. A man's voice, low and careful, said in Korean, "I have information about who arranged the hotel situation. I want to meet, tonight." Who is this? Someone who was in the room when the plan was made and is no longer comfortable with where it's going. Min-jae was quiet for 2 seconds. "Where?" The man gave an address, said, "A warehouse near the port in Yeongdongpo," the kind of location that was either a genuine meeting or the setup for something far less conversational. "Midnight," Min-jae said. "Come alone." "No," Min-jae said flatly. "I'll come with 2 people. You'll come with 2 people. We'll be civil about it." A pause. "Fine." The call ended. Min-jae set the phone down. He looked at the city through the window. 9 weeks until the baby came, give or take. His wife was in Mapogu and wouldn't speak to him and thought he had spent the evening with another woman. His head of security was possibly the most dangerous traitor he had encountered in 15 years of running an operation that attracted traitors the way standing water attracted mosquitoes. The Seo family was circling. The Yun family was compromised in ways he hadn't fully mapped yet, and now an anonymous call to a port warehouse at midnight. He thought about something Nia had said to him once, early in their marriage, during one of the conversations she'd had about his work. The real ones. The ones they'd had late at night when she was less diplomatic and more honest. She had said, "I think the thing that actually scares me is not the danger. It's that you've built your whole world out of people who are only loyal until they're not. And one day you won't be able to tell the difference until it's too late." He had told her she was wrong. He had been so certain she was wrong. He looked at the hole in the bathroom wall. He could see it from here, still, the rough-edged gap in the drywall. And for the first time in 15 years of building something he was absolutely certain of, Kang Min-jae was not certain of anything. He called Ren. "Midnight meeting," he said. "Yeongdeungpo Port. I need you and one other, someone we can both vouch for, and I mean actually vouch for, not assume." Ren was quiet for a moment. "That's a short list right now." "I know," Min-jae said. "That's the problem. The warehouse in Yeongdeungpo smelled like rust and river water, and the specific kind of cold that comes off concrete that hasn't been heated in months." Min-jae arrived at 11:52 with Ren on his left and a man named Baek Tae-soo on his right. Tae-soo was 41, had worked perimeter security for 7 years, and was on the short list of people Ren had named without hesitation when Min-jae asked who they could actually vouch for. Tae-soo didn't talk much. That was part of why he was here. The warehouse was a long rectangular space, port adjacent, with high windows that let in nothing useful and a floor that was mostly bare except for 2 stacked pallets near the far wall and a folding table that someone had set up in the middle of the space with 3 chairs on each side. Someone had also brought a work light, the kind that runs on a battery pack, and positioned it on the table so that it lit both sides approximately equally. That detail registered with Min-jae as intentional. Whoever had set this up wanted to see faces. 3 men were already seated on the far side when they entered. Min-jae had expected 2. He stopped walking at the midpoint between the door and the table. Ren stopped with him. Tae-soo's hand moved. "You brought 3, Min-jae said. The man in the center, the one who had called, was in his mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had been rearranged once or twice and settled into its new configuration. He said, "The third person asked to be here. He has information you need more than anything I have." "Who is he?" The third man stood up. Min-jae knew him. His name was Lee Gwang-soo. He was 62 years old. He had been one of the 3 founding partners of the organization Min-jae had eventually absorbed and rebuilt into what it currently was. He had retired, or appeared to have retired, 4 years ago. He had shaken Min-jae's hand at a dinner, said he was getting old, and walked out of the room with the dignity of a man making a clean exit. Min-jae had believed him. He looked at Lee Gwang-soo standing across a folding table in a Yeongdeungpo warehouse at midnight and understood, in the particular way that understanding sometimes arrives, not gradually, but all at once, a complete picture assembling itself in a single second, that he had been wrong about several things for a very long time. "Sit down," Lee Gwang-soo said. Not a request. Min-jae sat down. Ren and Tae-soo remained standing behind him. "You should tell your men to relax," Gwang-soo said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be cold." "How encouraging," Min-jae said. "Talk." Gwang-soo sat down. He folded his hands on the table. He had the unhurried manner of a man who had waited a long time for this particular conversation and was not going to rush it now that it had arrived. 4 years ago, he said, when I stepped back, it wasn't because I was tired. It was because I needed distance. Specifically, distance from you. Specifically, I needed you to stop watching me so that I could do what I needed to do without you in the way. Min-jae said nothing. "You're good at what you do," Gwang-soo continued, and the compliment landed like a blade, flat, side down. "You took what the 3 of us built and made it into something none of us had the patience for. I respect that. I also spent 4 years systematically building the infrastructure to dismantle it. The work light hummed between them. Why? Min-jae said. One word. The question wasn't really about motivation. He could work out the motivation. It was about something more specific, something that had been sitting in the back of his mind since the hotel corridor. Because you were going to be untouchable in another 2 years, Guangsu said. The Seo Alliance, the Incheon expansion, the financial structures you've been building through the Brooks Woman's company. Min-jae's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough. Guangsu saw it. Yes, we know about that too. What exactly do you know about my wife's company? We know you've been using it to move clean money through legitimate fashion industry transactions. Small amounts, carefully done. You thought it was invisible. He paused. It wasn't invisible. The temperature in Min-jae's chest dropped about 4 degrees. He had told himself, when he'd started routing certain financial flows through Nia's business, carefully, surgically, amounts that wouldn't register against her genuine revenue, that it was protection, that it gave her company a stability that her work alone couldn't guarantee in its early years, that he was doing it for her. He had known, somewhere that he hadn't looked directly at, that he was also doing it because it was useful, because her company was clean, because her name was not his name. He had never told her. How long have you known? He said. 2 years. And you used it. We used everything available. Guangsu's voice didn't carry apology or satisfaction. It was matter of fact, the tone of a man describing a strategy, not confessing a sin. The hotel situation was part of it. Yes, we arranged for Seo-yeon to be there. We knew your wife was flying in early because we have a source at Incheon who flagged her booking. We timed it. We wanted you distracted and your wife out of the picture. Out of the picture, Min-jae repeated. She's an asset. Not just the money, her. A man like you, who has never visibly cared about anything enough to be leveraged by it, suddenly has a pregnant wife he's clearly attached to. Guangsu looked at him without apology. That's a vulnerability. We moved to neutralize it before you could protect it. Min-jae looked at the folding table. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up. You said you have information I need. You called this meeting. You're sitting across from me telling me things you didn't have to tell me. So, he leaned forward just slightly, elbows on the table. What do you want? Guangsu glanced at the man to his right, the one who had made the call. Something passed between them. Then he looked back. I built something alongside you. For 5 years before you were who you are, I was in rooms you weren't in yet. I want recognition of that. I want 3 territories returned to Mapo, Yongsan, and Dongdaemun. I want a formal acknowledgement of my position in writing, and I want Park Sung-ho. Min-jae's expression didn't change. Sung-ho. He's been working with me for 14 months. I want him transferred formally to my operational authority. You want me to gift you my head of security? He was never yours, Guangsu said. He was mine first. You inherited him when you rebuilt the organization, and he stayed because I told him to stay. Because I needed eyes. The warehouse settled around them. Something dripped somewhere near the far wall. A pipe. A leak. The river asserting itself through the concrete. Min-jae sat with 14 months in his head. 14 months of Sung-ho standing at his shoulder. 14 months of Sung-ho answering his calls, executing his directions, finding Naya's location at 6 in the morning with the speed of someone who had already known where she was. He found my wife last night, Min-jae said, very quickly. He knew which guest house she'd go to. We'd mapped her social contacts 6 months ago. Guangsu said it without inflection. She was never in danger. That wasn't the goal. What was the goal? To break your concentration at a critical operational moment. The Incheon containers were the real target. The hotel was the distraction. We needed 72 hours of you being emotionally compromised while we moved the containers and realigned 3 supplier relationships that were yours. He paused. It worked. It had worked. Min-jae knew it had worked because he had spent last night sitting on a hotel bed
And this morning, sitting in a car outside a guest house in Mapo, and this afternoon, trying to hold his operation together with his left hand while his right hand kept going back to an ultrasound photo on a nightstand. He had been exactly as compromised as they'd needed him to be. He thought about what Ren had said. That's a short list right now. He thought about who was on that list. Ren, Tae-soo. 2 people out of an organization that employed, directly and indirectly, several dozen men. Here's what I don't understand, Min-jae said, and his voice was very quiet now, the flattest it had been all night. You have Sung-ho. You've had him for 14 months. You moved the containers. You've realigned the suppliers. You've had 14 months to do considerably more damage than you've done, and you arranged a meeting instead.
So either you want a deal because something in your plan isn't working the way you expected, or you're trying to get me comfortable and relaxed in a warehouse at midnight. He looked at Gwang-soo steadily. Which is it? Gwang-soo's expression shifted. It was a small shift, a tightening around the eyes, a recalibration. Neither, he said, or both. The plan is working, but the direction it's going concerns me. Concerns you. There are people involved in this who want to go further than I sanctioned. The hotel was mine. The containers were mine. What they're proposing for the next stage. He stopped. Your wife, Min-jae. And the child. The air in the warehouse changed. Not physically. Nothing moved. No sound changed. The work light kept humming. But something in the molecular weight of the space shifted, and both Ren and Tae-soo felt it, because both of them moved. Small adjustments, weight distribution, hands. Min-jae did not move. Explain, he said. There's a faction. Inside what I built. Inside the people who've been working with me. Younger, less patient. They see your wife and the baby as a way to end you completely. Not just reduce you. They want to use her. Gwang-soo's voice had changed too, slightly. Something that wasn't quite guilt, but was adjacent to it. The voice of a man who had drawn a line and found others crossing it. I didn't sanction that. I built a campaign to reduce your operational territory, not to... He stopped again. I'm 62 years old. I have children. Where's my wife right now? Min-jae said. Safe. Tonight she's safe, but the faction has her location. And if we don't reach an agreement tonight, I can't guarantee what they'll do with it after tomorrow. Min-jae stood up. The movement was not fast. It was not aggressive. He simply stood, the way a man stands when he has received information that has changed the geometry of everything and now needs to be vertical to process it correctly. He stood, and he looked at Lee Gwang-soo, and he looked at the man who had made the call, and he looked at the third man, who had said nothing the entire time, and he stood there for a long moment in the rust and river smell of the warehouse. I need 20 minutes, he said. Gwang-soo nodded. Min-jae turned and walked toward the warehouse door. Ren and Tae-soo followed. Outside, the port air was cold and smelled of diesel and distance. Min-jae walked to the edge of the loading dock and stopped and looked at the black water and breathed. Ren stood next to him. He didn't say anything immediately, which was why Min-jae trusted him. After a moment, Ren said quietly, Is any of that true? About Nia's company? Min-jae looked at the water. Some of it, he said. Ren absorbed that. Another silence, then, She doesn't know. No. If this goes where it might go, if it comes out publicly, I know. She'll think everything was, I know, Ren. He said it without sharpness, just tiredness. The specific exhaustion of a man who has been awake for 36 hours carrying something he should have put down a long time ago. I know what she'll think. He pulled out his phone. He looked at her name in his contacts. He looked at the time, 12:19 in the morning. She was asleep, probably, or lying awake the way pregnant women lie awake when their bodies won't cooperate with their minds. He did not call her. He could not call her. Not because he didn't want to, because what he needed to say was not a phone call. What he needed to say required him to be in a room with her, to be able to look at her and let her look at him, and have her understand not just the explanation, but the parts underneath the explanation, the choices he'd made and why he'd made them, and how badly wrong they had been in ways he was only now fully measuring. He could not do that in a parking lot at midnight while Li Guangsu waited at a folding table inside. He put the phone back. "The deal," Ren said. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Guangsu wants out of something he started and can't stop. He's 62 and the people he empowered are doing things he didn't plan for. And he called me tonight not to negotiate from strength, but because he's scared of what his own faction will do next. So we use that. But not for the deal he's offering." Min-jae turned back toward the warehouse. "I don't give him Mappo. I don't give him anything. I want names. Every name in the faction, every operational plan they've made for Nia and the baby, every contact Sung-ho has been relaying to Guangsu's network. I want all of it. And in exchange, I don't make the rest of his life uncomfortable." He won't accept that. He will. Because the alternative is that I walk away from this table and I deal with the faction myself without his help, which means I deal with everything he built without the map he's offering. It'll take longer and it'll be messier, but I'll get there. He knows I'll get there. He looked at Ren. He didn't come here to win. He came here because he's trying to contain something that's already out of his control. That's a different conversation. They went back inside. Yuck. The negotiation took 40 minutes and it was not polite. Guangsu pushed back on 3 points. Min-jae did not move on any of them. The man who'd made the call, his name was Huang, Min-jae learned. He was a mid-level logistics coordinator who'd been feeding information to Guangsu for 2 years and was now genuinely frightened of the faction he'd helped build. Said very little and sweated visibly under the work light. At 1:45 in the morning, Guangsu gave him 4 names. 4 names in the faction, the core of it, the people who had discussed using Nia and the baby. He also gave him the communication protocol Sung-ho had been using and the server address the faction used for its planning documents. In exchange, Min-jae told him, walk away. From all of it. Retire again, and this time actually mean it. Don't build anything. Don't make calls. Don't pass messages. If I hear your name connected to my operation in any context in the next 10 years, I'll revisit this conversation. Guangsu looked at him for a long moment. You know I could have handled this differently. You could have, Min-jae agreed. You didn't, and I want to understand why. But this isn't the night for it. Guangsu stood. He buttoned his coat. He was 62 and he looked it. More than Min-jae remembered. More than 4 years of supposed retirement should have done. The particular aging of a man who has spent years doing something difficult in secret. The faction won't stop because you have their names. I know. They'll move faster when they know you know. I'm counting on it. Guangsu looked at him one more time with the expression of a man doing a final calculation and finding that he's already on the wrong side of it. Then he walked out of the warehouse with his 2 men, and the door swung shut behind him, and the echo of it moved through the empty space and dissolved. Ren said, Sung-ho. Tonight, Min-jae said, before he knows we have the server address. They picked up Park Sung-ho at his apartment in Cheongdong-gu at 3 in the morning. He opened the door in a t-shirt and sweatpants with the particular alertness of a man who had been expecting a call, just not necessarily this specific knock. He looked at Min-jae. He looked at Tae-soo. He looked at the third man Ren had brought, someone from the outer perimeter who Sung-ho had never directly managed, which was exactly why he was here. Sung-ho said, Min-jae? Get dressed, Min-jae said. We're going to have a conversation. At 3 in the morning. You should have thought about the hours when you took the job from Guangsu. The color left Sung-ho's face. Not dramatically. It drained, quietly, the way water drains. His expression didn't collapse. He was trained against that. But the color went, and it didn't come back, and he stood in his doorway in his t-shirt and his sweatpants, and the 8 years between them sat in the hallway like something that had been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. I didn't want it to be this way, Sung-ho said. Get dressed, Sung-ho. They took him to a secondary location, a building Min-jae kept for exactly this kind of conversation, in Mappo of all places, which was either ironic or simply geographic. Sung-ho sat in a chair that was not restrained, which Min-jae had decided was important. A man who sits voluntarily tells you different things than a man who can't leave. Sung-ho talked. He didn't want to at first. He tried the route of controlled disclosure, offering enough to seem cooperative while rationing the important parts. Min-jae had sat through this performance from better people than Sung-ho in the past 15 years. He let it run its course. Then he put the server address on the table in front of Sung-ho and watched Sung-ho understand that the controlled disclosure route was closed. After that, Sung-ho talked properly. 14 months. Gwang-soo had approached him 14 months ago through a contact Sung-ho had trusted from a previous operation. The offer had been framed as a correction, as a returning of balance, a way of acknowledging that Gwang-soo's founding contribution to the organization had been inadequately honored when Min-jae rebuilt it. Sung-ho had told himself it was about fairness. He was practiced enough with self-deception to maintain that narrative for a while. And the faction, Min-jae said, the 4 names Gwang-soo gave me. What were they planning for my wife? Sung-ho looked at the table. Sung-ho. They were going to take her, he said. Not harm her. They're not... He stopped. The plan was to take her and hold her as leverage, force you to sign over 3 territories and dismantle the Incheon operation formally, then release her. How far along is the plan? They have a location. In the countryside, Gyeonggi province. He swallowed. They also know she's been staying in Mappo. They've had someone on the guest house since yesterday morning. The specific coldness that went through Min-jae then was not anger. It was something more fundamental than anger. A bodily thing, the cold of a man who has just understood how close a line was drawn that he didn't know was being drawn. He stood up. Where is Ren? Outside, Tae-soo said. He walked out. Ren was in the corridor. Min-jae said, the guest house. Now. I need someone there right now, tonight. I'll go myself. Take 2 people. Don't knock on her door. She doesn't need to know there's a threat. She needs to think you're there for another reason. Tell her there's been a security situation in the area and I asked you to check on her. She won't believe you, but she'll be angry at me, not frightened. He was already moving toward the exit. The faction's people. If there's surveillance on the building, remove it quietly. Don't cause a scene. And you? I'm going to deal with the 4 names. Tonight? Yes. He pushed through the exterior door into the Mappo night. Cold, the river close, the streets quiet at 4 in the morning. I've been patient about this for the last 36 hours because I didn't know the shape of it. I know the shape of it now. Ren looked at him. Min-jae. He said it carefully. If you move on all 4 tonight, there's no taking that back. That's not territory negotiation. That's, I know what it is. I'm not questioning whether it's justified. I'm saying once you do it, the Seo family, the Yoon people, everyone who's been watching to see how you handle this, they'll read it as a signal. Everything changes after tonight. Min-jae stopped walking. He stood on the sidewalk in Mappo-gu at 4 in the morning and he looked at the streetlight and he thought about his wife sleeping in a guest house 3 blocks from where he was standing, with a faction's surveillance on the building and a plan to use her that had been in motion since before she'd gotten on a plane with an ultrasound photo in her pocket. He thought about the hole in the bathroom wall of Suite 1407. He thought about Gwang-soo's voice saying, the Brooks woman's company. He thought about what Nia would say when she eventually found out. Not if, when. That he had routed money through her business without telling her. That the company she had built from the ground up in a country that wasn't hers, in an industry that hadn't welcomed her immediately, with 4 years of work and the particular exhausted pride of someone who had made something real out of nothing. That it had been quietly, carefully used as a vehicle for his money without her knowledge or consent. That was not an explanation he had a version of. There was no version of that conversation where she didn't look at him the way she'd looked at him in the elevator. That face, that pre-devastation face, before she'd even begun to process it. Everything already changed, he said to Ren. It changed the moment she stood in that corridor. He pulled out his phone. He found Nia's contact and he looked at it, and he didn't call her because there was nothing he could say tonight that would be true enough and complete enough to be worth the call. He put the phone away. The 4 names, he said. Tonight. Ren was quiet for 1 more second. Then he nodded. And they moved, and the night moved with them, and behind them the city of Seoul kept its familiar posture of absolute indifference to whatever was happening inside it, to whoever was being broken or rebuilt or ended in its 4 in the morning streets, and the river ran where it had always run, dark and without opinion. In the guest house 3 blocks north, Nia Brooks lay awake on a borrowed mattress with her hand on her stomach, watching the ceiling, while outside her window a man Ren had sent stood quietly in the dark, ensuring that no one else came close. She didn't know he was there. She was thinking about the ultrasound photo. Whether Min-jae had looked at it, whether he had understood what it meant that she had left it there instead of taking it with her, and she was thinking about the question she'd been circling since the elevator, not whether she could forgive him, because that question was too large for right now, but whether the man she had believed she was married to had ever actually existed, or whether she had spent 3 years building a detailed and specific love for someone who was partly her own construction. That question was keeping her very thoroughly awake. And across Mapogu, in the places where such things were handled, Kang Min-jae was becoming, with cold and deliberate efficiency, something he had always been capable of being and had kept largely out of sight. The version of himself that did not negotiate, did not moderate, did not weigh consequences against sentiment. The version that ended things. By morning, all 4 names would be settled. By morning, his wife would be safer than she had been in 36 hours. And she would not know it. And he would not be able to tell her, because telling her meant telling her everything. The faction, the territories, the financial routes, the 4 years of Guangsu's quiet architecture, and the part that had nothing to do with any of them. The part that was just him, and the choices he had made with her company, and the specific trust he had broken long before Seo Yan ever walked out of Suite 1-407 with her shoes in her hand. He walked into the dark, and the door of everything he had built swung shut behind him. And on the other side of it was a man he wasn't sure he recognized anymore, doing the only things left available to him, in the city he had made his own, in the night that belonged to no one. By 5 in the morning, all 4 names were done. Min-jae did not participate directly in all 4. He did not need to. What he did was authorize, and in his world, authorization was the same thing as action. It carried the same weight, the same responsibility, the same permanent ink. He sat in a car outside a building in Yeongdeungpo while Tae-soo and 2 men he trusted handled what needed handling inside, and he looked at his hands in his lap and breathed through his nose, and did not think about what was happening in the building. He thought about Nia instead. He thought about the specific way she laughed when something caught her off guard, the involuntary kind, the kind she tried to contain and couldn't. He thought about that, and kept his breathing even and waited. Tae-soo came out at 5:12. He nodded once. That was all. They drove back through Seoul in the early dark, the city still mostly asleep, the Han River visible between buildings in brief gray flashes. Min-jae called Ren from the car. "The guest house," he said. "Quiet all night. I pulled 2 of their surveillance people off the building around 2. They didn't fight it." Ren's voice had the texture of a man who had not slept. "She's still inside. No movement. Stay until morning, until she leaves the building voluntarily. And then? Then follow at distance. Don't let her see you." He hung up. He went to a secondary apartment he kept in Mapo. Not a place Sung-ho had known about, one of 3 properties that existed outside his official operational infrastructure, maintained under a company name that went through 4 layers of registration before it connected to anything real. He showered. He changed. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall and did not sleep. At 7:30 he called his attorney. Not his criminal attorney, his civil one. A woman named Bae Hyun-ji, who handled the legitimate side of his financial holdings, the above-ground portion of his life that was entirely real and entirely clean. She answered on the 3rd ring with the wariness of someone receiving a 7:30 call from a client who rarely called before 10. "I need to know the exact exposure on the fashion company accounts," he said. "Everything that was routed through in the last 2 years. Amounts, dates, transaction labels. I need it by this afternoon." A pause. "Is this about the audit flag that came up last month?" Min-jae went still. "What audit flag?" "The one I told your financial office about. The NTS query on the 3rd quarter filing. I assumed your team had passed it along." Another pause. Min-jae, your financial office confirmed receipt. His financial office, which had been coordinated for the past 14 months, with Park Sung-ho having access to internal communications. Send everything to my personal address, he said. Not the office line, my personal email. Is something wrong? Send it by noon. He hung up. He sat very still on the edge of the bed and understood that the tax authority query on Nia's company had been sitting in a file somewhere in his organization for a month, filtered and held by a man who had been working to dismantle him, waiting to be used at precisely the right moment. The 4 names he'd dealt with overnight had been the faction's operational arm. The audit query was a different kind of weapon, slower, legal, and infinitely more damaging to the one person in this entire situation who had done nothing wrong. If the NTS pursued the query and found what they would find, Nia's company would be implicated in financial flows she hadn't known existed. Her business license, her reputation, 4 years of work. He needed to get ahead of it before it moved. He needed to talk to her first. He called her at 8. She answered after 4 rings. Her voice had the texture of someone who had slept badly and was not surprised by the call but hadn't decided yet how to be about it. We need to talk today, he said. Not a negotiation, a statement, a silence. Then, I told you I wasn't ready. I know, this isn't about us. There's a situation with your company that you need to know about, and it can't wait. The quality of her silence changed. What situation? Not on the phone. I need to see you. I need to be in the same room. Another silence, longer. He could hear her breathing, slightly elevated, the way it got when she was managing something internally. Where? Wherever you're comfortable, your choice. A pause. Jiyeon has a car. There's a cafe in Hapjeong, the one near the park. I'll be there at 10. Okay. She hung up without saying anything else. He sat with the dead phone and felt the specific weight of what was coming. Not the conversation, but everything around the conversation, everything he was going to have to say, and everything she was going to hear, and the gap between those two things that he had no map for. Yet, the cafe in Hapjeong was small and warm and smelled like espresso and toasted bread. It was the kind of place that filled with laptop workers by 9:30 and emptied by 11, which meant 10 was its quietest moment. Nia was already there when he arrived. She had chosen a table in the back corner, away from the window, with her coat still on and a cup of something in front of her that she wasn't drinking. He sat down across from her. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything for a moment, and in that moment he registered everything, the shadows under her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way her hands were flat on the table on either side of her cup, not holding it, just resting, the way people rest their hands when they're keeping them visible so they don't do anything they don't intend. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had made it through something and was still in the middle of making it through it. You look terrible, she said. I know. Did you sleep? No. She looked at him for another moment. Then she looked at her cup. Tell me about the company. He told her. He did not preface it or soften it. He told her that over the course of 2 years he had routed amounts of clean money through 3 transaction channels in her company's quarterly filings. He told her the amounts. He told her the mechanism. He told her that a National Tax Service query had been filed against her third-quarter accounts a month ago, and that he had only learned about it this morning because the notification had been held from him by someone inside his organization who was working against him. He told her all of it without looking away from her face. Her face did not do what he expected. It didn't collapse. It didn't flash hot with anger, not immediately. It did something more disturbing than either of those things. It went very still. The specific stillness of a person absorbing something that is too large to react to in real time. How much? She said. He told her the total. She looked at her cup. My company, she said. Not a question, not yet an accusation, just the 2 words held up and examined. Yes, my company that I built. Still that same flat tone. That I started with $40,000 I saved before I moved here. That I spent 18 months getting the first client for. That company. Yes. She looked up at him. Her eyes were dry. That was almost worse.
He had braced himself for something that involved tears, and she was giving him something that did not, something that was colder and more accurate. You used my company to hide your money, and you didn't tell me. I told myself I was protecting it, giving it stability. That's not a justification. I know it's not. I'm telling you how I thought about it. You thought about it. The flat tone cracked slightly just at the edge. You thought about using my business to launder money, and you decided to do it without asking me, without telling me, because you thought about it and decided it was okay. I decided it was manageable. I was wrong. She pushed back from the table. Not standing up, just creating distance, moving her chair back 6 inches, putting space between herself and the table and him. She put one hand on her stomach. Not distress, habit, the way she always put her hand there when she was processing something difficult, a physical anchor. The hotel, she said. Not connected. The woman at the hotel was sent. It was staged. Someone inside my organization arranged for her to be there at that moment because they knew you were coming and they wanted me distracted. She stared at him. Staged. Someone used your flight information. They knew you changed your ticket. They timed her to come out of that room when you were standing in the corridor. She was quiet for a long moment. He watched her work through it. Not the emotional work, the logical work, the sequencing of it, the way she always processed things before she let herself feel them. So someone knew I was pregnant, she said slowly. They knew I was coming. They set up a scene designed specifically to break my trust in you at a specific moment, and the reason for the specific moment was to compromise me operationally, to pull my attention while they moved against my organization. They used me, she said it quietly, as a tool, to hurt you through me. Yes. She took her hand off her stomach and put it flat on the table. And the money in my company, did they know about that too? Yes, they were planning to use the audit as a second weapon, to expose you publicly if the first move didn't break me completely. She looked at the table for a long time. Outside the cafe, Habjong went about its morning. People walking, a delivery bike, the ordinary percussion of a city at 10 in the morning. None of it had any relevance to what was happening at this corner table. I need you to fix the tax situation, she said finally. Whatever it takes. My company doesn't go down because of choices you made. That's not negotiable. I know. I'm working on it. How long? Days. Maybe a week. She nodded. Then she stood up, picking up her coat, and he understood the conversation was over. This conversation, the practical one, the one she'd come for. The other one was not happening today. Nia. He stood too. She looked at him, just looked at him, and in her face he could see both things simultaneously. The woman who had spent the night in someone else's guest house, working out whether the man she'd married had ever been real, and the woman who had just heard him confirm that someone had deliberately used her and their unborn child as instruments. And both of those things were present in her face at the same time, occupying the same expression, and he did not have a single thing to say that would resolve either of them. I'll call you, she said. About the company. She walked out. He stood at the back corner table of the cafe in Hapjeong and watched her go, and the ordinary morning went on outside the window, and he breathed in and out with the specific care of a man maintaining his composure in a public place because the alternative was not acceptable. His phone went off. Ren. He answered it while he was still looking at the door she'd walked through. What? The faction. Ren's voice was tight. They know about the 4 names. Whoever was their communication relay, they had a failsafe. If contact was lost, an automatic signal went to 2 numbers we didn't know about. Who are the numbers? That's the problem. One of them traces to a man named Im Cheol-soo. He's Seo family. Min-jae went cold. The Seo family is involved with the faction. Not was, is. The alliance with Guangsu wasn't just Guangsu. He had Seo backing, which means when we moved on the 4 names, we didn't just end the faction. We hit Seo assets without knowing they were Seo assets. Outside the cafe window, a bus moved past, blocking the view of the street for 4 seconds, then clearing. They're going to respond, Min-jae said. They already are.
Im made 3 calls in the last 40 minutes. One of them was to a number we track. It's connected to a crew that works Mapo and Yongsan. Mapo. Where Nia was. Where she was walking right now, 3 blocks away, 36 weeks pregnant, alone. Get to her, Min-jae said, already moving. Right now, Ren. Right now. He was out of the cafe before Ren finished acknowledging. The morning air hit him, cold, sharp. He turned left, the direction she'd gone, and started moving fast, not running yet, scanning. The street was the ordinary kind of busy. Not crowded, not empty. Foot traffic? A few cars. He saw Ji-yeon's car at the far end of the block. Still parked. He could see Nia's silhouette through the rear passenger window. She hadn't left yet. He was 50 meters away when a second car pulled up alongside Ji-yeon's. He started running. What happened in the next 4 minutes was the kind of event that exists differently in memory than it did in time. Compressed and distorted, certain details hyper-real, and others completely absent. He would remember the sound of Ji-yeon's car horn, sudden and sustained. The second car's door opening. A man he didn't recognize getting out with the specific purposeful movement of someone with a task. Tae-soo appearing from somewhere to Min-jae's left. He had been covering the street, bless him. He had been on the street the whole time. And closing the distance to the second car faster than the man from it could reorient. Min-jae reached Ji-yeon's car and put his hand on the rear door handle and pulled it open, and Nia looked at him from inside with an expression that was equal parts alarm and fury and something that was not quite fear but was adjacent to it. Move to the center of the seat, he said. What is happening? Middle of the seat, away from both doors. He got in and pulled the door shut. Ji-yeon, drive. Straight ahead. Don't stop at the light. Ji-yeon drove. She was shaking slightly, but she drove. And behind them, Tae-soo was handling the man from the second car in a way that was going to require explanation to the 2 mourning pedestrians who had witnessed it, but would not require Min-jae's attention. Nia was looking at him. Her jaw was tight. Her hand was on her stomach again. Tell me what is happening right now. The people who staged the hotel, there are more of them than I thought. They know where you've been staying. So this is... She stopped, restarted. They were going to take me. They were going to try. She breathed. One breath, controlled, through her nose. Her jaw didn't unclench, but her expression changed slightly. Not softening, recalibrating, processing. The same way she'd processed everything in the cafe, in sequence, without letting the emotion get in front of the logic. Where are we going? She said. Somewhere they don't know about. How many somewhere they don't know abouts do you have? Enough! She looked at him for a long moment. The car moved through Hapjeong toward the river. Ji-yeon was breathing audibly but holding the wheel steady. This doesn't change anything, Nia said. Between us. This doesn't fix anything. I know. I need you to be clear. I'm going with you because I'm 36 weeks pregnant and there are people trying to use me as a weapon, not because... I know, he said again quietly. I know that. She looked away, out the window. The river appeared briefly between buildings, that same gray Han River that had no opinion about anything. She watched it and he watched her watch it. And Ji-yeon drove, and the morning continued its indifference around them. His phone buzzed. Ren. Theo family is mobilizing. It's not just Mapo. They're moving on the Gangnam office too. He texted back, how many? Ren. Enough. You need to get in front of this tonight or there's no organization left by morning. He put the phone down on his thigh. Nia, without looking at him, said, how bad is it? He didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Min-jae. She was still looking at the window. How bad? Bad enough that I need to end it tonight. She turned then. She looked at him with the full force of her attention, which was something he had always felt as a physical thing. She had a quality of focus, when she chose to use it, that made you feel thoroughly seen. Not comfortably, just completely. If you end it tonight, she said, what does that mean? It means I take the fight to them, on my terms, before they can consolidate. And if it goes wrong? He didn't answer. Her jaw moved. She looked back at the window. Our baby is coming in 3 weeks, Min-jae. I know. 3 weeks. I know. The car crossed into the quieter part of the Riverside Road. Less traffic now, the morning opening up slightly around them. Ji-yeon exhaled, slowly, deliberately, and her shoulders came down a centimeter. Then don't let it go wrong, Nia said. She said it quietly, without drama. The way she said things when she had run out of the particular energy required for drama and what was left was just the truth, stripped down, the actual thing underneath everything else. Don't let it go wrong. He looked at her profile, the line of her jaw, the way her hand rested on her stomach with the complete unconscious naturalness of a woman who had been making that gesture for months and no longer thought about it. I won't, he said. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. He moved Nia and Ji-yeon to the Mapo property, the one that didn't exist in any network Sung-ho had touched. He installed them there with Tae-soo, who was the person he trusted most with this specific task, because Tae-soo was not strategic and not politically complex. He was simply the kind of man who stayed in front of a door until the person behind it was safe. Then he went to war. The Seo family's mobilization was not subtle. They had numbers, and they had the advantage of anger. Nothing motivates faster than a faction finding out that its operational arm has been removed overnight. Cheol-soo had made his calls, and by mid-afternoon the Seo network was moving against 3 Min-jae positions simultaneously. The Gangnam office, a warehouse in Guro that held his operational records, and a financial relay point in Seocho. Min-jae let them hit the Guro warehouse. It was a calculated loss. The records there were real, but not catastrophic. Nothing that could be used as legal exposure, nothing that touched Nia's company, nothing that wasn't already backed up in 2 other locations. He let the Seo crew take it because letting them have a win pulled their attention and their confidence in a direction he could use. He concentrated everything on Gangnam and Seocho. By 6 in the evening, the Gangnam office had been held. 2 of his people were hurt. Not badly, nothing permanent, but hurt. And he received the report with the flatness of a man who has made peace with certain costs and is focused on the accounting. The Seocho relay had been a shorter fight, faster, because he'd moved people there first, and the Seo crew had arrived to find the position already reinforced. They'd pulled back. But Cheol-soo was still operational, and Cheol-soo, as the evening progressed, made a decision that reoriented everything. He called Min-jae directly. The call came at 7:43. Min-jae was in a car in Gangnam reviewing a damage report with Ren. He looked at the unfamiliar number, made an educated guess, and answered. Cheol-soo, he said. A pause. Then, you know who I am. I've known for about 12 hours. You're running this for the Seo family. I was running it with Gwang-soo, Cheol-soo said. His voice was younger than Min-jae expected, mid-30s, with the tight control of a man who is managing fear and doing it imperfectly. Gwang-soo was supposed to hold his side. He didn't. He got old. He got soft. There's a difference. A breath. You moved on 4 people last night. You did it without warning, without negotiation, and 2 of them had Seo family affiliation. I didn't know that at the time. Doesn't matter. You know what it means now. It means you had to respond. You responded. Here we are. Cheol-soo was quiet for a moment. We have something that changes this conversation. Min-jae felt it before he heard it. The specific anticipatory coldness of a man who knows what's coming but can't stop it from arriving. Your wife's location, Cheol-soo said. The Mapo property, the one that's not registered to anything you own on paper. The coldness spread from his chest to his hands. He kept his voice level. You don't have her location. We've had someone on Ji-yeon since this morning. When you moved them, we followed. We know the building, we know the floor, and we have people 2 blocks away right now waiting for my call. Ren was watching him from across the car. Min-jae's face had not changed. He had a very specific muscle in his jaw that he had trained over 15 years not to move. And it was not moving now. But something in his eyes had changed, and Ren, who knew him well enough to read what wasn't visible, went very still. What do you want? Min-jae said. A meeting, tonight. You, me, and the CO family representative. No weapons on either side, no backup inside the room. We settle the territory question formally, and we end this. Where? Yongdong-po Port. Same warehouse you used last night. A brief, humorless pause. Seems appropriate. If anything happens to my wife before that meeting, nothing will happen. That's not what I want. I want a resolution, not an escalation. The escalation is costing everyone. 9 o'clock, Min-jae said. 9 o'clock. He hung up. Ren said immediately, he has the Mapo address. Yes. Do you believe him that she's not in immediate danger? Min-jae looked at the window. The Gangnam evening traffic moved past, ordinary and relentless. No, he said. I believe he thinks he doesn't want immediate danger. I don't trust that his people will maintain that if the meeting goes wrong. So we move her again. We move her again, right now, before he has time to tighten the people on that building. He was already calling Tae-soo. And we need a location they cannot have. Not Ji-yeon's network, not anything connected to Nia's contacts, not anywhere I've ever used. Tae-soo answered. Nia, Min-jae said. Get her out of the building right now, out the back. There's a gray access corridor on the south side of the building. It exits to the alley between the block and the convenience store. Take her there and call me once you're moving. What's the destination? Min-jae thought for exactly 2 seconds. The hospital, he said. Iwo Women's University Medical Center. Take her to the maternity ward intake. Say she's 36 weeks and experiencing back pain. They'll admit her to monitoring. She'll be in a medical facility with controlled access, security desk, and no reason for anyone to believe she's there for any reason other than prenatal care. A pause. Then Tae-soo. She's going to hate that. She's going to be safe, Min-jae said. She can hate it. He heard movement on Tae-soo's end. A door. Footsteps. Then Nia's voice in the background, sharp and questioning. Tae-soo saying something to her. A brief, fierce exchange. He couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the shape of them. Nia's voice doing the precise thing it did when she was not frightened but was furious, which was its own kind of reassuring. Then her voice, close to Tae-soo's phone. Min-jae, I know, he said. You're sending me to a hospital. Yes. I'm not in labor. I know. You'll be in a controlled environment with security and legitimate medical staff and no way for anyone to access you without going through a nursing station. He paused. Please, Nia. A silence, the kind that meant she was doing the math and arriving at the same answer he had. Fine, she said, but you're explaining this to every nurse who looks at me like I'm wasting their time. I'll handle every nurse in Seoul if you're in that building. She said nothing for a moment, then, come back from tonight. He closed his eyes. Yes. The line went back to Tae-soo. Min-jae said, move now. He lowered the phone. Ren was looking at him with the expression of a man who needs information and is waiting for the right moment. The meeting tonight. You know, it might be a setup. It might be. And if it is, then I deal with that when I get there. He looked at Ren. Same as last night. 2 people inside. But this time I want 6 outside, positioned on the perimeter before we arrive. And I want them there an hour early. Understood. Ren hesitated. Min-jae, after tonight, whatever happens, the organization is going to look different. I know. Some of what you built isn't going to survive this. I know that too. Are you okay with that? Min-jae looked at the Gangnam Street, at the ordinary people moving through their ordinary evening, at the lights coming on in the buildings above them as the sky went from gray to dark. He thought about 3 weeks. He thought about a small curled shape in the lower left corner of an ultrasound photo. He thought about a woman currently being moved through a building service corridor by a man he trusted, heading toward a hospital maternity ward, furious and safe. Yes, he said. I'm okay with that. The car moved. The city moved around it. The Yongdeongpo port was 40 minutes away, and the night was coming down fully now. The kind of Seoul winter night that is cold enough to feel like a physical presence, that gets into your collar and your cuffs, and reminds you that the city does not accommodate you, that you accommodate it, that you always have and always will. At 8:57, Min Jae's car turned onto the access road leading to the warehouse. The headlights cut across the dark. And inside the warehouse, something was waiting that was not what Im Chil-soo had described on the phone. More people, more positions, the particular arrangement of a space that had been set up not for a negotiation but for a conclusion, and Min Jae walked through the door knowing it, feeling it in the changed air the moment he crossed the threshold, his body telling him what his eyes were still confirming. And he looked at Im Chil-soo standing at the far end of the warehouse, flanked by 6 men instead of 2. And Im Chil-soo looked back at him with the expression of a man who has made a decision he can't take back. "You lied," Min Jae said. Im Chil-soo said, "So did you." And the lights went out. The darkness lasted 4 seconds. Min Jae dropped before the lights went out, not because he had seen it coming, but because his body had made the decision before his mind caught up, some deep animal calibration that had kept him alive through 15 years of rooms like this one. He hit the concrete on his left shoulder and rolled and came up behind one of the stacked pallets near the entrance, and the sound of the warehouse reorganized itself around him. Boots on concrete, the scrape of something metal, Ren's voice somewhere to his right saying one word in Korean that was not a word for public company. Tae-soo was not here. Tae-soo was at the hospital with Nia, which was the only thought Min Jae permitted himself about that before he shut it off completely. Tae-soo was there. She was there. Everything else was this warehouse and the next 60 seconds. His 6 perimeter people were outside. The question was whether Im Chil-soo's people had handled them before the lights went out or whether they were still functional, and the question after that was how quickly they could breach the warehouse doors. He did not have a weapon. He had come to a negotiation. That had been, he understood now with the clarity that darkness and concrete provide, his last significant miscalculation. Ren, however, was not a man who attended meetings without contingencies. The shot came from somewhere near the east wall, a suppressed report, more pressure than sound, and one of the 6 men flanking Im Chil-soo went down with a noise that was not dramatic, just weight hitting the floor. Ren had come in with something under his jacket and had been waiting for exactly this moment, and now the dynamic in the warehouse had changed because Im Chil-soo's people understood there was a weapon in the room and they didn't know where it was. Min Jae moved. He moved along the wall toward the nearest man. Not Im Chil-soo, not the one farthest from him, the nearest one, the one whose silhouette he could read from the ambient light coming through the high windows, which was not much but was enough. He covered the distance in 4 steps, and the man had not fully reoriented from the shot when Min Jae reached him, and what happened next was not clean or technical. It was fast and brutal and left Min Jae with a cut along his left forearm from a blade he hadn't seen, and the man on the floor and a weapon in his hand. The warehouse doors blew open, his perimeter people, all 6 of them, or enough of them. He couldn't count in the noise and the dark and the movement, but enough. The next 90 seconds were the kind of thing that leaves no specific memory, only a general impression of controlled chaos and the specific exhaustion of a body doing things it has been trained to do without the luxury of thought. When the lights came back on, someone found a breaker, somewhere, and the industrial overhead stuttered and caught. There were 4 of Im Chil-soo's men on the ground, and 2 of Min Jae's perimeter people hurt, one of them badly enough that his legs weren't working right and someone was already on the phone. Ren was standing near the east wall with blood on his collar that wasn't his, breathing hard, holding the weapon with the steady hands of a man running on adrenaline and discipline. Im Chil-soo was still standing. He was in the center of the warehouse, near the folding table that was still there from the previous night. The same table, the same work light, now knocked sideways and pointing at nothing. He had a gun in his hand that he had not fired. Min Jae understood why. Firing would have committed him past the point of any exit. Im Chil-soo was, underneath the strategy and the family affiliation and the 4 months of careful operation, a man who had not fully decided how far he was willing to go. That indecision was the only reason Min Jae was still breathing. They looked at each other across the warehouse floor. Im Chil-soo's chest was heaving. His hand was steady on the weapon, but the rest of him was doing the work of containing something that wanted out. Not fear exactly, not remorse, something more complicated. The face of a man who had set something in motion and watched it become larger than he'd intended. "Put it down," Min-jae said. His voice came out even. He did not know how. His forearm was bleeding steadily. His left shoulder was going to be spectacular bruising by morning. And he was standing in a Yeongdeungpo warehouse at 9:15 on a Wednesday with a stolen weapon in his right hand, and his voice came out even. Chol-soo looked at him. "If I put it down, we finish this conversation, the one we were supposed to have. There's nothing left to negotiate. You killed 4 of our people last night."
"Your people were planning to kidnap my pregnant wife." The evenness cracked slightly at the last 2 words, just slightly. "You want to talk to me about what was owed?" Chol-soo's jaw moved. He looked at the gun in his hand.
He looked at the men on the floor. His men, the people he had brought here, the people who were on the floor partly because of choices he had made. His hand came down slowly. He set the weapon on the folding table. Min-jae lowered his. They stood there, both of them breathing, the warehouse settling around them, the one working overhead light humming its single flat note. "The Seo family didn't authorize the plan for your wife," Chol-soo said. His voice had changed, flatter, stripped of the tactical layer. The voice underneath. "That was Gwang-soo's faction. I knew about it. I didn't stop it because I thought it would end quickly and clean. I was wrong." "You knew?" "Yes." Min-jae looked at him. "Then you don't get to tell me the Seo family wasn't involved. You made that decision." Chol-soo said nothing. "Here's what happens now," Min-jae said. "You go back to the Seo family. You tell them the Gwangsu alliance is dissolved, it's dissolved permanently, and any infrastructure they built through it is no longer theirs. The 3 territories Gwangsu wanted, Mapo, Yongsan, Dongdaemun, stay with me, not as negotiation, as consequence." He paused. "In exchange, I don't make the Seo family's involvement in the faction a matter of public record within the network. That information stays in this room. And if the family doesn't accept those terms—" "They will," Min-jae said, "because the alternative is that I spend the next 6 months dismantling every Seo-connected interest in this city, and I have the capital and the patience to do exactly that, and everyone in this room knows it." He looked at Chol-soo steadily. "The Seo family is rational. Rational people take the exit when it's offered." Chol-soo looked at the table. He looked at the men on the floor. He looked at Min-jae with the specific expression of a man measuring the distance between where he expected to be standing tonight and where he was actually standing. "I'll take it to them," he said. "Tonight." "Tonight," Min-jae nodded. "Take your people and go." Chol-soo picked up his men. The ones who could walk helped the ones who couldn't, and they moved toward the warehouse door. At the threshold, Chol-soo stopped. He didn't turn around. "The woman who was at the hotel," he said. "Seo-yeon. She didn't know about your wife. She knew she was being used to create an impression, but she didn't know the full plan." Min-jae said nothing. "She's 26, Chol-soo said. And then he walked out. The warehouse door swung shut. Ren exhaled, a long, controlled exhale, the kind that means a body is recalibrating. "We need to get your arm looked at." Min-jae looked down at his forearm. The sleeve was dark and wet from mid-forearm to wrist. "Hospital," he said, and almost laughed at the word. "I know which one, Bosta." He did not go straight to Ewha Women's University Medical Center. He went first to a clinic 3 blocks from the port that handled the kind of injuries that didn't benefit from official documentation. 6 stitches in the forearm, a bruised shoulder that the physician, a compact, unimpressed man in his 60s who asked no questions, told him would resolve in 2 weeks. He wrapped it, cleaned it, taped it, and was done in 40 minutes. Then he sat in the clinic's back room and called Ren, who was getting his collar attended to. "The Incheon operation," Min-jae said. "The 4 containers we lost. Can we recover them?" "2 of them, maybe. The other 2 are already redistributed through Gwangsu's network. The network is compromised anyway. So we write them off. The financial relay in Seocho. Holding, some damage, nothing structural. The Gangnam office? Functional. We need to rebuild the security infrastructure from scratch because we can't know how deep Sungho's access went. A pause. That's going to take months. Then we take months. Min-jae looked at the ceiling of the clinic's back room, water-stained institutional tile that had nothing to recommend it. How much do we lose if we pull out of the Incheon expansion entirely? Ren was quiet for a moment, the quiet of a man doing math he wasn't expecting to do. Significantly, it was 3 years of groundwork. But survivable. Yes, survivable. Pull out, completely. Sell the assets through the legitimate holding company. Clean price. Don't hold out for premium. He lowered his eyes from the ceiling. I'm going to be reducing the operation, not temporarily. I want you to start identifying what we can legitimately divest over the next 12 months. Ren was very quiet now. I'm not disappearing, Min-jae said. I'm not leaving you holding wreckage. But I'm going to restructure what this is. What I'm doing and what I'm not doing. It's going to look different in a year. Because of Nia, Ren said. Not a question, not a judgment, just a statement, precise and accurate, the way Ren spoke. Because of a lot of things, Min-jae said. Nia is one of them. He hung up. He put on his coat over the wrapped arm. The sleeve wouldn't go over the bandage, so he draped it, which looked absurd but was functional. And he went out to the car and told the driver, Ewha Women's University Medical Center. The driver looked at the coat sleeve. Are you okay, sir? Drive, Min-jae said. The maternity monitoring ward at Ewha was quiet at 11 at night, fluorescent and clean-smelling and purposefully calm. A nurse at the desk looked at him, at his face, at the draped coat, at the general impression he presented of a man who had been somewhere difficult, and said with the measured neutrality of medical professionals everywhere, Can I help you? My wife, he said. Nia Brooks Kang. She was brought in earlier this evening. The nurse checked her screen. Room 7. She's on fetal monitoring. Everything is stable. She paused. Are you the husband? Yes. She said to let you in if you came. Another pause. She also said to tell you, and I'm quoting directly, that you owe her an extremely long explanation. She's right, he said. Room 7 was at the end of a short corridor. He knocked. Her voice said, Come in. She was in the monitoring bed, not a hospital gown. She was still in her own clothes, coat folded on the chair beside her, which meant she had come in with the intention of leaving as soon as possible and had been overruled by the monitoring equipment. 2 fetal heart rate sensors were attached, and the machine beside her made the steady rhythmic sound that he had heard once before at a prenatal appointment 3 months ago, and which he had not been able to describe afterward, except to say it sounded like something very specifically alive. She looked at him. She looked at his coat sleeve. Her eyes moved from his face to the sleeve and back to his face, and something in her expression shifted, not softening exactly, but rearranging. Sit down, she said. He sat in the chair beside the bed, moving her folded coat to his lap. He looked at the monitoring machine. The numbers were steady. The sound was steady. Is she okay? He said, meaning the baby, and Nia understood that. She said. The tech tonight confirmed it. It's a boy. He looked at her. She was looking at the machine. Her jaw was doing the thing it did when she was containing something large. They did a quick scan while I was here anyway. He's fine. Heart rate's good. He's just apparently very comfortable and in no hurry. Min-jae looked at the machine for a moment. Then he looked at his hands on her folded coat in his lap. I ended it tonight, he said. The faction, the CO situation. It's done. Are you? She looked at the coat sleeve again. Is that blood? Stitched. It's fine. Her jaw tightened. She looked at the monitoring machine. How done is done. The immediate threat is over. The CO family will accept terms. I'll hear back tomorrow, but I know the answer already. Guangsu is finished. The 4 people who plan to use you. He stopped. They're not a concern anymore. She nodded slowly. The kind of nod that is not agreement but acknowledgement. Receiving information, filing it. The company, he said. I've already contacted my attorney. The exposure on the tax query can be addressed. The flows can be traced to my holding structures and separated from your operational accounts.
It'll take careful documentation and probably a voluntary disclosure to the NTS, which my attorney is preparing. Your company's license is not at risk. Your name is not at risk. My name, she said quietly. Nia. My name was never supposed to be at risk. She looked at him. Her eyes were dry and direct and very tired. My name was never supposed to be in any of this. No, he said. It wasn't. But it was. For 2 years. Without my knowledge. Yes. She looked at the machine again. The steady sound continued, patient, rhythmic, entirely unconcerned with the conversation happening around it. I keep thinking about the day I registered the business, she said. I went to the government office. I had all my paperwork. I waited 2 hours, and when they gave me the registration certificate, I sat in the lobby and I cried a little. Not because it was... She stopped. Because it was mine. It had my name on it, and it was mine, and I had made it. She breathed out slowly. And while I was building it, you were using it. Yes, he said, because there was nothing else to say. No version of this that had a different word in the middle of it. She was quiet for a moment. The machine beeped its steady beat. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at his hands. Because if I told you, you would have said no. Yes, she said, I would have. And I wanted it available. It was useful and it was clean and it was yours, which made it safer than anything I controlled directly. I told myself I was protecting your business by giving it stability, and that was also true, but it wasn't the whole truth. It wasn't even most of the truth. No, he said, it wasn't most of the truth. She put her hand flat on her stomach. That gesture, the one she always made, the unconscious anchor. She looked at the wall. He watched her profile in the fluorescent light, the line of her jaw, the specific exhaustion that had settled into the corners of her eyes. You know what the worst part is, she said. It's not the money. It's not even the risk you put my business in. It's that for 3 years I believed I'd built something completely separate from your world. Something that was just mine. My work, my clients, my name. And it wasn't. She looked at him. You were inside it the whole time. He could not fix that. There was nothing in the room, nothing in his considerable capability for making things happen, that could fix what she had just said. She was right, and being right about it meant the thing she had believed was hers had been something else for 2 years, and that could not be undone. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure it's only yours, he said. That's the only thing I have to offer you right now. Not as a promise. I know what my promises are worth to you tonight, as a statement of what I'm going to do regardless of what you decide. She looked at him for a long moment. The monitoring machine kept its rhythm. What are you deciding? She said. About the organization, about what you do. I'm reducing it. Over the next year. Selling what can be sold legitimately, walking away from the rest. I'm not going to do it overnight. I don't have that luxury. There are people who depend on the structure, and I'm not going to abandon them to the Seo family or whoever fills the vacuum. But I'm building towards something different. He paused. I should have started building toward it before tonight. I know that. She was quiet. I'm not telling you this to make a case, he said. You asked what I was deciding. That's the answer. The machine beeped. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed, and a nurse's footsteps went past and faded. I'm not ready to forgive you, Nia said. I want to be clear about that. Not the hotel. I believe you about the hotel, and I believe it was staged, and I believe nothing happened. But the company, that's going to take me a long time. I know. I might not get there. I know that too. She looked at him with her tired eyes. But I'm also 36 weeks pregnant, and the person who did this is still the person who drove 40 minutes to get me the right kind of paper and sat with me through 3 miscarriages without saying a single wrong thing. She looked back at the machine. I don't know what to do with both of those things being true at the same time. You don't have to know tonight, he said. No, she agreed. I don't. They sat with the machine's rhythm between them, the room warm and fluorescent and purposefully calm, and neither of them spoke for a while. It was not a comfortable silence, but it was an honest one. The silence of 2 people who have said the true things and are now sitting in the space those things have made, which is not a comfortable space but is at least real.
At some point, without planning to, he put her folded coat back on the chair and reached out and put his hand over hers where it rested on the edge of the bed. Not on top of her hand, beside it. His hand next to hers, not quite touching, an offer rather than a claim. She looked at their hands. Then she moved hers 2 inches and his closed over it. The CO family accepted the terms the next morning. The call came through a formal channel at 9:47, relayed through a representative who spoke in the careful Korean of official communication, and Min Jae received it at Ren's secondary office, the one that Sung Ho had never known about, and listened to the terms accepted back to him point by point, and said, "Confirmed." And the call ended. He sat with the phone for a moment. Then he put it down and drank the coffee that had gone cold on Ren's desk, and thought about how something that had cost that much could end that quietly. Ren, in the chair across from him, said, "Sung Ho." They had kept Park Sung Ho in the Mapo building since 3 in the morning 2 days ago. He had been cooperative in the way that men are cooperative when they understand that the alternative is considerably worse than cooperation. He had provided everything, the full 14 months, every communication, every piece of information he had relayed to Guangsu's network. "Let him go," Min Jae said. Ren looked at him. "He stays out of the city for 2 years. He knows that. After 2 years, if I haven't heard his name connected to anything, we're finished with it." Min Jae looked at the cold coffee. "He has a family. I'm not interested in making him a lesson." Some people will see that as soft. Some people can see whatever they want. Ren nodded once. He picked up his phone to make the call. Min Jae stood up. He walked to the window of Ren's secondary office, which overlooked an unremarkable street in a part of Mapo that had no particular significance to anyone. Just a street. People going about their morning. He thought about Yoon Seo-yeon, 26 years old, who had walked out of a hotel suite the way she'd been told to walk out, who hadn't known the full picture. Im Chol-soo had told him that in the warehouse doorway as a parting statement, and Min Jae had filed it without responding. He'd had someone pull her background in the intervening days. She worked in marketing. She had a decent academic record. Her brother Dae-ho had used her as an instrument because she was available and because her youth and her gender made the staged impression maximally damaging, and she had agreed because her brother had told her it was important, and she trusted him the way younger siblings trust older ones. Not completely, but enough. He did not forgive her. He also did not pursue her. He called Dae-ho. Dae-ho answered with the voice of a man who had been waiting for this call and dreading it. "Min Jae, your sister is out of this. Whatever role she played, it ends here. She doesn't hear from me or anyone connected to me. But you," he paused. "The distribution network in the Southern Territories goes to someone else. I'll give you 60 days to transition your contracts, and I'll give you a fair exit value for your operational stake. After 60 days, we're not in business together." A silence. "That's 60 days, Min Jae said. "It's a fair exit. I'm not destroying you. I'm ending the arrangement." He paused. "Take care of your sister, Dae-ho, and stop using her as a piece." He hung up. Nia went home from the hospital 3 days after the warehouse night. Not their home. She went to Ji-yeon's first, for 1 week, because she needed the specific kind of space that is not about geography, but about having a door you control entirely yourself. Min Jae did not argue with this. He arranged for Ren to coordinate discreet security for the building. Not visible, not intrusive, just present. And he left her alone. She called him on the 4th day. "The tax situation," she said. "Voluntary disclosure filed yesterday. My attorney presented documentation showing the flows originated from my holding structure and were misclassified in your company's accounts due to a processing error. The NTS accepted it as a bookkeeping issue. You'll receive a formal clearance letter within 2 weeks." A pause. "That's it?" "For the legal exposure, yes. For the rest of it," he stopped. "That's up to you." She was quiet for a moment. "I want to meet with your attorney. Myself. I want to understand exactly what was in my accounts, and I want to review the clearance documentation before it's finalized." "Of course." "I'm not..." She paused. "I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do." "I know," he said. I'll have her contact you directly. Another silence. How's your arm? Healing. Does it need to be looked at again? I had it checked yesterday. It's fine. Okay. A breath. I'll call you after I talk to the attorney. She called him 2 days later. The attorney meeting had gone well. Nia had arrived with her own list of questions and worked through them methodically, which the attorney had apparently described to Min Jae afterward as the most organized client interaction I have had in 20 years, with a tone that was equal parts respect and mild intimidation. After the attorney call, the conversations became more frequent. Not warm, not easy, honest. About the company, about what the next 6 months looked like, about logistics for the baby. Practical conversations that required them to be in contact and therefore kept a line open that might otherwise have closed. He did not push beyond what she gave. When she gave him a practical conversation, he had a practical conversation. When she went quiet for a day, he was quiet too. He had always been good at patience in operational contexts. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he was capable of it here as well. Quote, 3 weeks and 2 days after the warehouse, Nia went into labor at 4 a.m. She called him herself. He was at his apartment, the one they had shared, which felt different now, which had the particular quality of a space waiting to be decided about. He answered on the first ring, and she said, in a voice that was controlled but had something urgent moving underneath it, "It's time. I'm with Jiyeon. We're going to Iwa." "I'm coming," he said. "I know," she said. He drove himself. He arrived at the hospital 11 minutes after she did and found her in a labor room with Jiyeon on one side and a midwife on the other, and she looked at him when he came through the door with an expression that he did not try to interpret because interpretation was not what was needed right now. He crossed the room and stood on her free side, and she didn't tell him to leave. 14 hours later, not dramatic, not cinematic, just the long and unglamorous and occasionally frightening work of a body doing the most difficult thing a body does. Their son arrived. Min Jae was holding her hand when it happened. She had allowed it sometime around hour 9, not as a statement, not as reconciliation, just as a practical matter. She needed something to hold, and he was there. He held her hand and she crushed it with a force that would leave bruising along 3 of his fingers, and he did not mention this, and when the midwife said, "He's here," both of them were not together and not apart, but something more complicated and more real than either of those things. He was small and red and furious about the transition, which Min Jae thought, privately, was reasonable. Nia held him first. She held him against her chest, with the midwife still close, and Ji-yeon crying openly 3 feet away. And she looked at him the way people look at things they cannot believe are real, with the specific, reverent attention of someone memorizing something before it can change. Then she looked at Min Jae. "Come here," she said. He came. He sat on the edge of the bed and she tilted the baby toward him, and he put his arms in the configuration the midwife had shown him during the long middle hours, and the baby was placed in them. He had held, in his life, a variety of things that had weight. Nothing had weighed like this. He sat with his son in his arms and the fluorescent light above him, and Nia watching him from the pillow, and he breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, and stayed very still, the way he stayed still in situations that required absolute accuracy, except that this was not a situation requiring accuracy. It was a situation requiring only the capacity to be present in it without flinching. He did not flinch. After a moment, Nia said quietly, "What do you want to name him?" They had discussed names twice, briefly, in the before time when the worst thing they were dealing with was figuring out the nursery. They had not reached a decision. He looked at the small face. The eyes were closed. The fury had subsided into something that looked, improbably, like consideration. "You decide," he said. "I want to know what you want." He thought about it honestly. "Jun-ho," he said. "Kang Jun-ho." He looked up at her. "If you want it." She looked at the baby in his arms. She looked at the name sitting in the room. "Jun-ho," she said, trying it. "Nia calls her son Jun-ho. She said it the way you say something when you're deciding if it fits. We can pick something else." "No," she said. "It fits." He looked back at Jun-ho. Junyo's hand moved independently, 5 small fingers spreading and contracting in the purposeless way of newborns, And Min-jae put his finger into the palm and felt the grip close around it. Reflexive, total, entirely without agenda. And he sat with that for a moment in the quiet of the room. Bonk. 6 months later, Min-jae Kang signed the last transfer document on the Incheon operation. He signed it in the office of his civil attorney, Bae Hyun-ji, who had spent the intervening months doing the most meticulous paperwork of her career and who had never once asked him why. He signed it and put the pen down and looked at the window of her office, which showed a section of Seoul sky, overcast and ordinary. "That's the last of it," she said. "What's left?" 2 legitimate investment holding structures, the real estate portfolio in Seocho, the logistics company, which is entirely clean. She looked at her papers. Viable. Not what it was, but viable. Good. He had told Ren in a different office 3 months ago, "I'm building toward something different." Ren had listened and then had spent 3 months helping him do exactly that. Because Ren was, at his core, a man who worked within the structure in front of him. And this was the new structure, and he was adapting. He was good at adapting. The people who had depended on the organization had been not abandoned, not simply released. Min-jae had spent 3 months sorting through the list of people whose livelihoods were connected to what he was dismantling, identifying which situations could be redirected and which could not, making the calls that needed to be made. It was not perfect. Some of it was uncomfortable. But he did it with more care than he had applied to most things in the past 15 years, because that care was the only honest accounting he could offer. He walked out of the attorney's office into the Seoul afternoon. The city was, as always, entirely itself, enormous and efficient and unconcerned. He stood on the pavement for a moment and looked at it. This city he had spent 15 years making his territory, which was now neither more nor less than the city it had always been, indifferent to his claim. He called Nia. She answered on the second ring. In the background, he could hear Junho making the specific sound he made when he was working himself up to something. Not distress, just effort. The sound of a 4-month-old engaged with the world. "The transfer is done," he said. A pause. "All of it?" "Everything we discussed." Another pause. Longer. He could hear her breathing and the background sound of their son and the specific acoustic quality of their apartment, which he had been back in for 6 weeks now, carefully, 1 day at a time. The way you re-enter a place that has been through damage, not assuming it's the same, not pretending the damage didn't happen, just showing up and doing the work of being present. "Okay," she said, "come home." He stood on the pavement in the Seoul afternoon with those 2 words in his ear and let them settle. Then he put the phone in his pocket and turned toward the parking structure and walked, and the city moved around him as it always had, vast and ongoing and without sentiment, except that for the first time in 15 years of moving through it, Kang Min-jae was not moving toward territory. He was moving toward home, and that he was learning was a different kind of navigation entirely, Tagyu. Slower, less certain, requiring a different kind of courage than anything the past 15 years had asked of him. The courage of a man who has put down his armor in front of the one person whose opinion of what he looks like without it actually matters. He was not good at it yet. He was going to have to learn. Nia, who had built a business from $40,000 in a country that wasn't hers and raised their son through 4 months of the reconstruction of a marriage, would not make it easy for him. She had never made anything easy that didn't deserve to be hard. He was, he realized, somewhere between the parking structure and the car in the ordinary gray Seoul afternoon. Chet, grateful for that. He got in the car. He drove home.